At a bend in the river Tiber, which flows between the Capitoline and Janiculum hills in Rome, which has undergone so many changes down the centuries, lies a corner of the city where memories of the past have survived in all their fascination. According to the historian Titus Livius, the island dates back to the year 509 BC, after the fall of the ancient monarchy. In reality, the Tiber island is as old as Rome itself and must have been very useful to the Romans. This piece of land slowed the flow of the river, facilitating passage from the Etruscan to the Latin side. For centuries, the bridges that linked the river banks were made of wood. It was in the 1st century BC that the first stone bridge was built. The Ponte Fabricio, as it's known in Italian, was built in 62 BC by Lucius Fabricius, and the Ponte Cestio in 46 BC by Lucius Cestius. The Ponte Fabricio, also known as the Ponte Quattro Capi, or Bridge of the Four Heads, because of the four-headed sculpture at one end, is the only ancient bridge in Rome that has maintained its original shape. In 293 BC, a terrible plague struck Rome. After consulting the Sibylline books, envoys were sent to Epidaurus, home to the cult of Aesculapius, Greek god of medicine. The Roman trireme sent to Greece returned with a sacred serpent, symbol of the god. The serpent disappeared near the Tiber island, thus indicating the place where the new temple of Aesculapius was to be built. The temple was inaugurated in 289 BC. The site of the temple coincides exactly with the Church of St. Bartholomew. Erected in the 10th century, the building was completely remodeled in 1624 by Martino Longhi the Younger. The bell tower, dating back to 1113, is one of the most interesting examples of the Romantic style in the city and was part of the original medieval church. In 194 BC, the temple of Jupiter Urarius was built, to the divinity that protected vows and pledges. The remains of the ancient structure can still be seen in the area beneath the church of St. John Calibita and the new radiotherapy center. The first finds occurred in 1854, when a piece of dull red mosaic floor was discovered, bearing an inscription in small white stones. In the 1930s, statues and architectural fragments were unearthed and are in exhibit today in the National Museum of Rome. In the 1st century BC, the island was artificially shaped to look like a ship. The idea was inspired by the legend concerning the sacred serpent and the ship that sailed from the shores of the Aegean to the banks of the river Tiber. Remains of this work can be seen on the lower end of the island, which looks like the prow of a vessel. These include the massive head of a bull, the bust of Aesculapius, and the serpent curling itself around the staff. The main mast of the Tiber ship was a small obelisk in the center of the island. It remained there until the end of the 16th century. In its place stands the figure of St. John of God, founder of the order of friars known as the Fate Bene Fratelli. The statue rises in the square of San Bartolomeo all'Isola, where a spire was erected in 1869. The work of Ignazio Giacometti, it's crowned by an apex and decorated on the four sides with four statues of saints, among whom the Portuguese saint whose motto, "Do good, brothers," became the name of the Fate Bene Fratelli of the island. The entrance to the Sacconi Rossi chapel also opens onto the square. This building to the left of the Church of St. Bartholomew belonged to the confraternity of devotees of Jesus and Mary on Calvary, also known as the Sacconi Rossi, because of the red-colored sack-like shirts they wore during religious ceremonies. Their special task was to recover drowned bodies from the Tiber, give them a decent burial, and pray for the repose of their souls. A religious celebration, followed by a solemn procession, is still held on November 2nd every year to commemorate the ancient ritual of praying for the souls of those who've drowned in the river Tiber. For the people of Rome, the Tiber island is the island of the Fate Bene Fratelli, who set up their hospital here in 1583, when Pope Gregory XIII gave their congregation the church of St. John Calibita, the nearby hospice, and a sum of 3,000 scudi. The Fate Bene Fratelli Hospital, in its present form, is the result of several extensions, the last of which, completed in 1934 by the architect Mancini, gave the hospital the structure we see today. Several restructuring and excavation works have revealed elements testifying to the ancient history of the island and the Fate Bene Fratelli Hospital. Their attractive and sometimes problematic union of spaces and health services hosts a collection of great cultural and artistic value. Above the ancient temple of Jupiter Urarius, the remains of what is thought to be a 7th century church have been discovered. Originally dedicated to St. John the Baptist, it's now named after St. John Calibita, the Byzantine ascetic whose relics were brought here by Pope Formosus in the 9th century. The facade dates back to 1711 and is the work of Renato Carapecchia, a student of Fontana. The old sacristy and bell tower were rebuilt during the work done in the 1930s. The most important restructuring of the church of St. John Calibita took place in 1640, when the 3 naves were reduced to a single central nave, probably to create more space for the hospital wards. The interior contains interesting paintings and frescoes within a framework of polychrome marble and gilded stucco. The vault of the nave was decorated with "The Glory of St. John of God" by Corrado Giaquinto in 1741. The main altar is adorned with a precious early 18th century antependium in marble and madrepore. The ciborium dates back to 1931. The stucco angels and cherubs are Baroque. A fresco of 1300 depicting Our Lady of the Lamp decorates the first altar on the right. This Madonna is believed to be miraculous because the lamp that burns in front of her never went out even when the church was flooded in 1577. Numerous paintings decorate the walls of the church. On the left-hand altar is a canvas depicting the death of St. John Calibita, painted in the mid-1600s by Giovan Battista Lenardi. On the right of the presbytery is the martyrdom of Saints Marius, Marta, Audiface and Abacus, whose relics are preserved inside the church. This painting is attributed to Corrado Giaquinto, who was also responsible for the decoration of the roundel in the vault of the transept. Another important painting is that depicting the martyrs of Porto and St. Anthony Abbot, dating to the late 17th century. The door halfway down the nave opens onto the cloister of the Fish Fountain. Here there are lunettes illustrating the stories of St. John Calibita. The one on the right was painted by Pedroni in 1787, and the one on the left by an unknown artist is also of the 18th century. The Sala Assunta was used as a hospital ward until 1981 and is now a convention hall. Starting in 1702, the friars created comfortable wards. Each bed was surmounted by a canopy, and at the head of the bed were the tables on which was noted the treatment necessary for that particular patient, the precursor to our modern-day hospital files. Against the far wall stands an altar with a lovely late 17th century antependium above, which is an image of Mary being assumed into heaven between 2 angels. The 18th century painting, attributed to Andrea Giannaroli, is in a Baroque frame surrounded by stucco angels and was restored in May 1998. The frescoes on the vault, illustrating scenes from the life of St. John of God, are attributed to Paul Shaw. The papal coat of arms is that of Clement IX, who on March 1st, 1702 inaugurated the new hospital wing, which gave directly onto the square of San Bartolomeo. The same courtyard gives onto the Sala Verde, the old chapter room of the Fate Bene Fratelli order. It's decorated with 17th and 19th century paintings, including The Flagellation of Jesus by Mattia Preti of 1664, and a painting illustrating Blessed John the Great of the Fate Bene Fratelli by Marcello Sozzi of 1853. A statue of St. John of God by Giuseppe Rusconi stands in a niche. The old refectory of the religious community that works on the island is found in a large hall. The ceiling is decorated with enormous rays that emanate from the eye, the symbol of God, across the center of the hall. Interesting 18th century paintings decorate the walls. Starting at the entrance, on the right, is a painting of St. John of God. Further on, there's another depicting the visit made by Pope Clement XIII to the Fate Bene Fratelli Hospital in 1759. At the end of the hall, there's a painting illustrating the biblical scene of the dinner in Simon's house, a copy of the work of Paolo Veronese in the Louvre. In the early 18th century painting, St. John of God is represented wearing a crown of thorns on his head and carrying a crucifix in his hands. The painting of St. John the Great is of the early 20th century. The corner corresponding to the church of St. John Calibita gives directly onto the old pharmacy of the Tiber Island, which was built at the same time as the hospital itself, in 1584. The efficiency of this pharmacy on the Tiber Island must have been exemplary in every respect if the Fate Bene Fratelli were explicitly exempted from the Prohibition Act promulgated by Pope Innocent XIII, forbidding religious to engage in pharmaceutical activities. Inside the pharmacy is a fine collection of antique containers. On the second floor of the hospital is a small chapel decorated with a series of stained glass windows done by Oscar di Prata of Brescia in the 1930s. They depict the Mater Ecclesia embracing the Vatican and St. John of God, who is about to dry Christ's feet after washing them. The chapel of the old General Curia is part of the maternity unit. Figures of angels and pomegranate motifs, the symbol of the Fate Bene Fratelli, decorate the dome. The terrace offers magnificent views of the river and this part of the Eternal City, where an ancient hospital has succeeded in harmonizing the old with a modern health service here on the Tiber Island, a faithful and precious landmark which has witnessed 3,000 years of history. The link with tradition has remained unbroken. Today, adapted to the times, the Tiber Island is still what it was in ancient Rome, a place of suffering and hope, of study and activity, of art and culture. There's just one thing new that it has added to the religion of Aesculapius, the obligation not felt by everyone to the same degree, but no less valid for this, to see and love Christ in our suffering brothers and sisters.